We are nearing the 2024 presidential election. I know it's amazing. Seems like just yesterday it was 2020 and we were all freaking out, and we had our prior presidential election between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. But time moves fast. That's something I'm learning as I get older, and we are coming up on this next election. There is a lot of drama out there. There's a lot of tension. We know how these elections get. People are very much in support of their one side or the other side. And it's definitely just a hectic time anytime we have a presidential election in the United States. Although politics sucks to talk about, I feel like everybody has bias, including me in one way or another. It's important to talk about the election when it comes to financial markets and asset prices because it has a huge impact. The outcome of this election will affect different markets. It will affect different assets like Bitcoin, gold, the stock market, US treasuries. So we're going to talk about it and we're going to try to look at it objectively the best we can. So let's go ahead and get into it. Now let's start with the question that everybody wants to know the answer to. Who is going to win? Unfortunately, it's impossible to know, especially in a tight race like this. It seems like the odds have been pretty 50-50 ever since the Democrats took Joe Biden out and they subbed Kamala Harris in. If we look at the betting markets, which I've been hearing a lot of people talk about, they talk about Polymarket. When we look at Polymarket right now, it's saying that Trump has a 66% chance to win, or at least 66% of people are voting on Trump to win the presidential election, while 34% are voting on Kamala Harris to win the presidential election. So the betting markets are a little bit tilted in Donald Trump's favor. However, when we look at the popular vote on Polymarket, it says that Kamala Harris has a 60% chance to win the popular vote. Pretty interesting that we see most people betting on Donald Trump to win the election, but we're looking at Kamala Harris potentially getting more overall votes. And we also just have to keep in mind that these polls that we look at, these betting markets, I think the betting markets are probably a little bit better of a indicator than most polls because it's showing what people are actually putting their money on, what they're actually investing in, as opposed to a poll where it could be biased or you're not getting a very comprehensive group of voters. You know, you may have some bias as the person making the poll, but we really just want to keep in mind that anything could happen in this election. It seems like it's pretty close. So although we're seeing the betting markets in favor of Trump a little bit, we could definitely see a Kamala Harris victory. I think it's pretty close, and we'll just have to see. I only live in one state out of this huge country. How can I know how people are feeling in some of these key swing states like Pennsylvania or Florida or up in that upper east part of the country, Ohio, Michigan? We will just have to see what happens, but let's talk about some of the potential outcomes that we could see depending on which candidate wins the election. I saw that Paul Tudor Jones, who is a very well-known and famous investor, one of the most successful investors that we have out there today. I saw him in an interview on MSNBC, I think, or CNN. He said he is positioning his investments towards the outcome of a Trump victory. And when someone like Paul Tudor Jones says this, we know that a lot of other investors are probably doing the same thing. When we look at the stock market, when we look at Bitcoin, gold, and how much these assets have gone up this year, this is telling us that the market is somewhat pricing in a Trump victory, because we know that Donald Trump's policies are going to be a little bit more business friendly. We know that Donald Trump's policies are also probably going to be a little bit more inflationary as he's looking to implement lower taxes for the majority of people and the majority of entities. We know that he will probably be a proponent of lower interest rates, even though that might be hard to do with our current fiscal situation. So the fact that markets have gone higher, I think this is definitely somewhat of a Trump trade, as some people are anticipating or betting that he will win the election. So when we look at that, the fact that markets are tilting towards a Donald Trump victory, what happens if we don't get a Donald Trump victory? If we get a Kamala Harris victory? And I think the most likely thing that we will see in this situation is that markets correct downward. We're going to see a sell off. If markets are pricing in a Trump victory and we don't get that, then we are going to see some of these investors who are betting on a Trump victory, they're going to pull their chips off the table, right? We are going to probably see a sell-off in the stock market. I definitely think we'll see Bitcoin head lower, at least in the short term, because we know there's a lot riding on this election for Bitcoin. Now, long term, I think that Bitcoin's going higher because, as Paul Tudor Jones said in his recent interview, all roads lead to inflation. The government and the Treasury, the Fed, they're all going to have to work together to introduce more liquidity into the system as the US government goes into higher and higher levels of debt, higher deficits. So long term, the dollar is heading down, Bitcoin is heading up. But in the short term, when we think about what this outcome could mean for Bitcoin, it could mean either the United States embracing Bitcoin with a Trump victory, or the United States potentially rejecting Bitcoin with a Harris victory, or having stricter regulations. When we look at the stock market, we already have a regulatory environment that's been established, and people have been investing in the stock market for a long time. It's got a much larger market cap than Bitcoin. So yes, Donald Trump's policies will probably be better for business and more inflationary. So we will see the stock market like a Trump victory. But when we look at Bitcoin, the regulatory environment is still kind of being established. There's still a lack of clarity. And depending on who wins this election, this could either speed up the adoption of Bitcoin in the United States or slow it down. And we know that the United States is the world leader. So if we do get a Donald Trump victory, we know that he has come out as pro-Bitcoin. He spoke at the Bitcoin conference. The VP candidate, JD Vance, is a Bitcoiner. He's got other Bitcoiners in his potential cabinet. When we look at RFK Jr., Vivek Ramaswamy, Tulsi Gabbard, we know that Elon Musk has Tesla holding Bitcoin. This will definitely be better for Bitcoin if we do see a Donald Trump victory. There's no way to get around that. He's just shown that he is more pro Bitcoin than the Democratic Party at this point in time. What it's going to do if we see a Donald Trump victory is it's going to speed up the adoption process of Bitcoin. If we see it embraced here in the US, that means that we're going to see other countries follow suit faster, as opposed to a Kamala Harris victory where we're probably going to see more regulations on the Bitcoin industry, probably higher taxes, and that's probably going to slow the adoption of Bitcoin across the world, especially for government. So I think that people are buying Bitcoin in anticipation of a Trump victory right now, but I don't think it's fully priced in. I think a lot of people are waiting on the sideline. A lot of companies, a lot of other entities are waiting to see who wins this election because they know the outcome will have a huge impact on what the regulatory environment looks like for Bitcoin. Now, when we look at the stock market, I'm expecting the stock market to react similarly to how Bitcoin is going to react to the outcome of this election. If we do get a Kamala Harris victory, I'd expect the stock market to head lower on the news. If we get a Donald Trump victory, I'd expect the stock market to head a little bit higher. However, I don't think the stock market's reaction will be as volatile as Bitcoin. The stock market is already an established market. It has a much higher total market cap than an asset like Bitcoin. And we know that, like I said, a lot more is riding on this election for an asset like Bitcoin than the stock market. Yes, I think businesses would prefer for a Donald Trump victory, but it's really not going to change a whole ton for the stock market. And I've been kind of pondering whether we could see the stock market sell off a little bit on a Trump victory, as it could be a sell the news event. We know that investors have been positioning themselves towards a Trump victory, and that's probably part of the reason why we've seen the stock market continue to perform so well this year, while we've been seeing weaker economic data, signs that we are heading into a recessionary period. Could we see some of these investors who have positioned themselves towards the outcome of a Trump victory take some of their chips off the table if we do get that outcome, and take in some profits, take a little risk off the table? Because we know that the global economic situation is a little shaky right now. I wouldn't be surprised if we got news of a Trump victory and we saw the stock market sell off a little bit, as investors maybe look to go into assets that they consider a little safer. Maybe we see more investors shift into gold. Maybe with what this election means for Bitcoin, we see people shift out of stocks and into Bitcoin. But at the same time, if we get a Trump victory and we see Bitcoin heading higher, I think it's a little hard to believe that we're going to see Bitcoin and the stock market diverge. I'm leaning towards asset prices moving in tandem higher on the news of a Trump victory. Obviously, some more than others. I think that Bitcoin would probably move a lot higher than the stock market. But again, we will just have to see. We also have this Fed meeting coming up around the time of the election. That will have an impact. Although Trump has a higher probability of winning according to the prediction markets, I don't think that this is something that is super priced in. I think it's priced in and the markets are leaning that way, but this is still a very close election. It is not conclusive who is going to win. It's not like there is a clear favorite. So I would lean towards all asset prices for the most part heading higher on the news. Now, when we look at gold, if we get a Harris victory, I wouldn't be surprised if gold maintains its ground pretty well. We could see gold drop with other asset prices initially for like a day or two. But when we think about all the uncertainty that is out there right now, gold to me just seems like a very attractive investment, a very safe investment. We know that governments are continuing to load up on gold. And when people really don't know what is going to happen, they are going to look to an asset like that. Now, when we look at the dollar, I think it's a little bit difficult to know what's going to happen with the dollar in the short term. We know what's happening in the long term. The dollar is going to continue to lose purchasing power. It's going to continue to inflate. So that's why no matter who wins this election, we are going to see asset prices move higher long term, especially Bitcoin, as I think Bitcoin is going to be the best long-term hedge against inflation. But if we look at the potential outcomes, if we do get a Trump victory, we know that his policies are going to be inflationary. So maybe if we see Trump win and we see all these people shifting into assets, we could see the dollar go lower in value. But at the same time, does the world have more confidence in the United States and the dollar with Trump at the helm? Could this be an advertisement for the dollar, for US treasuries? Would people feel more comfortable there if Donald Trump was president? It's difficult to know. We also know that Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party have proposed the idea of higher taxes. They may also be more likely to keep tighter financial conditions, and this could strengthen the dollar in the short term. So we could see the dollar perform better over the next 6 months or so under a Harris administration if we get that outcome. So these are just all things to think about. But like I said, I think the dollar is going down long term. So if you are thinking long term, I think the best place to be is Bitcoin as an uncorrelated hedge against inflation, the best one out there. In the short term, when we look at what asset is probably going to hold its ground the best around the time of the election, I would say it's gold. Gold is an asset that has around a $15 trillion market cap. We know that no matter who wins the election, there is going to be a lot of uncertainty out there. So I think gold is a great spot to be if you're looking to escape that volatility over the next month or so, because things are going to get volatile. We know that this is going to be a very entertaining couple of weeks. I'm pretty excited. I don't know who's going to win, but I'm prepared for either outcome. That wraps it up for this video. If you didn't like and subscribe, please make sure to do that now. I really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching. I'll be back soon.